Okay, so let's look back on the weekend. Shane Stapleton still here in studio. Jamesie O'Connor on the line, hello.
Evening, Joe.
We were just remarking in the news round there, Jamesie, that semi-final weekend has now become a staple of Irish life. It's phenomenal. I think everybody's booking their weekend up in Dublin next year, regardless of where they're from.
Yeah, I mean, there's a former teaching colleague of mine. He's, a couple of sons and one of them abroad, and they were flying in for the weekend, and I was talking to him during the week about tickets and that, and by God, are they happy they made that trip? Because again, Joe, look at exceptional entertainment, unbelievable effort and commitment from the four teams involved. They gave it absolutely everything, and we had endless drama, spectacle. I mean, it had it all. I mean, particularly the second half yesterday was just, it ebbed and flowed. Sendings off, goals, goal chances, refereeing decisions. It was just unbelievable. And like you, I thought that last year was as good as it could get, because Saturday night Galway Clare was special, and then Sunday was matched it. But the two games of the weekend, I mean, the intensity levels, the aggression, the physicality, the absolute all-out commitment, and as I said, the skill thrown in with it. It was just a great weekend, and a hurling season that maybe hadn't lived up to the overall excellence of last year. Really took off at the weekend, and we've a final to savour in 3 weeks' time.
And at the end of it all, Shane, it's Kilkenny and Tipperary again. Now, it's a very different Kilkenny-Tipperary, even though it is Cody and She again. Those peak years felt like a countdown to this final. Nobody really expected both of these in this final. You couldn't have. Even Tipp at the start of the season, maybe the start of the championship season, but really, Kilkenny, nobody was putting in a final.
Yeah, not at all. And like Cody spoke afterwards, saying that there was no expectancy around the country and even within the county, and there wasn't, and they limped through Leinster. Do you remember that last day? It was like the last day of the Premier League, 94-95,
yeah.
Blackburn Man United, when you were looking. I was in Parnell Park for Dublin Galway, but checking Twitter to see the scoreline for Wexford and Kilkenny, and they could have gone out of the championship at that point, and now they're through.
And Kilkenny went 3 games without a win.
Yeah.
The Galway game, the draw, the Leinster final.
But then they found themselves in that game against Cork, and maybe Cork were the perfect opponents for them at the time, because Leinster is so dogged, so physical. It's very, very different to Munster, which is a bit more free scoring, and they came up against a team that kind of bent to their will in the second half. Cork had their chances to finish off Kilkenny, but in the second half it was just an arm wrestle, and they just had to heel under Kilkenny.
Jamesie, I did have that feeling on Saturday night watching it where I thought this actually could be Cody's finest hour in some respects, and then I thought, well, that's kind of ridiculous thing to say. And then Jackie Tyrrell said it as well, and the more I think about it, there is a strong argument. Certainly it beats several of those All-Ireland finals, that this was his most impressive feat in many ways.
I think so, yeah, because we all know the players that he had at his disposal. JJ, Tommy Walsh, Henry, Richie Power, Owen Larkin, Jackie. You can keep going. I mean, they were just an exceptional group of men, and still, it was a phenomenal achievement to keep them hungry, to keep the drive there, and to do what they did. But I think you could see it in his demeanour after the game that, there was a feeling, I think, that they had been written off and no one had really given them a chance. And even TJ's interview after the game, I thought, he was bristling a little bit as well at maybe the fact that they felt disrespected, and they certainly used, I think, every little thing they could to build that siege mentality and that motivation. But yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, there's probably less talent available than he had, would say, with those great teams in the past. But I mean, the level of intensity and the absolute savage commitment that they brought, and particularly in the first 20 minutes, Joe, I mean, they set the tone. And I use it on our coverage that everyone has a plan. The old Mike Tyson, until you're punched in the mouth, and by God did they punch Limerick in the face and hard in that opening spell, and it really set the tone for the game. And even from a Limerick perspective, you can talk about the onslaught that's coming, and you can tell yourself you're prepared for it, but then it hits you, and then you realise you're in an all-out war. And so credit to Limerick for fighting back the way they did. But I think Cody will take massive satisfaction, as I said, from having the players physically ready, having them mentally ready, and up and at it and at the pitch of it, and then having them just ready to give it absolutely everything for 70-75 minutes, whatever it took. And the satisfaction, I think, that probably Sheedy felt as well on Sunday, that listen, it was a real test of character and a real test of every fibre in those guys' bodies. And I suppose, look, they take they take everything, I suppose, in terms of how they approach things from him, and the sheer honesty that they produced. He had to have been thrilled with it and deeply satisfied with it. And that said, I mean, this is not, a talentless team. And, I look for the game at the forward line, and you're saying, well, hang on a second now, Richie Hogan, TJ Reid, Walter Walsh, Colin Fennelly, Adrian Mullen, probably the best young prospect in the game. They have to be respected. But still, it was just a real Kilkenny performance. And as I said, I think you're right, Joe. I think he'd have got extra satisfaction from this because, I think there were 14, pundits or whatever, 14 predictions in the papers on Saturday morning, and not one of them went for Kilkenny, and that, as I said, had to give me a bit of satisfaction.
Think about all the leaders on that Limerick team and the areas where they seem to be really, really strong all year. Like, they annihilated Tipp in the Munster final. There's no other way to look at it. And that half-forward line of Groat Hegarty, Kyle Hayes and Tom Morrissey, they spend so much of their time in their own half of the field. And like, Limerick are probably, without the ball, the most defensive team in hurling. But Kilkenny were cute, and they didn't follow them all the way up, but the forwards absolutely swarmed around them. And there was one incident early on in the first half, and Adrian Mullen ended up getting a point on a turnover, where Tom Morrissey was coming out around the 45 with possession, and 4 different Kilkenny lads hit him. And it was like Tyrone against Kerry back in the Puke football days. They absolutely annihilated him. So that half-forward line, and John Kiley insisted afterwards that they got lots of possessions, but certainly didn't impact the game. Like, they were running up the middle of Tipp throughout the Munster final. Never got a chance to do that. Aaron Gillan had 4 or 5 wides, and Hugh Lawler, like, first of all, there was a man sitting in front of that pocket where he likes to be. Second of all, Hugh Lawler kept putting him on his bad side, so his right side, and he had 4 or 5 wides on it. And as the game went on, Gillan lost confidence. Keane Lynch marked out of it by Conor Brown. And actually, just to jump over to the Tipp game for a second, Barry Heffernan went on lead chin and just marked him out of the game as well. So you're going after the leaders, and of course Declan Hannon going off injured didn't help.
I was looking through the stats of that Limerick-Kilkenny game. The one big deficit from a Limerick point of view comes with the wides, 15 wides to Kilkenny's 8. Otherwise, it's fairly nip and tuck in many ways. And as Jamesie says, the damage done probably in that first quarter. The remaining 3 quarters of the game, Limerick won at 2-15 to 13 points, but it's so hard to overturn that margin. You did what nobody has managed to quite do over the last 20 years, Shane, which is get Brian Cody to admit that he used dreaded tactics. This is your finest hour. If Saturday was Cody's finest hour, this is your finest hour as a journalist. He admitted he used tactics. Sure, a very tactical game was what he said. Like, of course, do you know what I find with the now increasingly brilliant Kilkenny players who come through this door and talk to us? So you'll talk to them and they'll say, but we didn't use tactics under Cody. It's not something we'd focus on. And then, Brendan Cummins showed in the Sunday game, the half-back line not going really, certainly not getting ahead of the ball, and only very rarely getting beyond their own 65. Or you'll talk to Kilkenny players and that, the half-forward line working back, or the centre half-back maybe dropping back in the full-back, and they'll all go, but that's not tactics. I actually just think they think tactics are these loftier things where it's actually just good common sense and not keeping players rigidly in a position. They've been doing it for 20 years.
There's so many tactics going on. Like, where you position players. Like, they can see the score and they decide, okay, we're going straight on top of Wally Walsh or TJ Reid for a puck out because that's our best chance of winning. The way they work the ball out from the back. So, just to reference the Munster final again and the difference between Limerick then and now, Tipperary went long on 3 guys who weren't really equipped to win 50-50 high ball against Diarmaid Byrnes, Declan Hannon and Dan Morrissey. So Kilkenny knew there's a fair chance that those guys will win a ball or 2. Tipp weren't able to go short because they didn't have the right lads in the full back line that are comfortable on the ball. Kilkenny were able to do that. They worked the ball out. They went to Joey Holden so often, Paul Murphy, Hugh Lawler. They popped the ball up the line, and then all of a sudden you're off in your motor and playing it into a midfielder. And they were, that's how you got your game plan going, because going long all the time doesn't work. Like, there are tactics everywhere, even putting Conor Brown and saying, just sacrifice your game completely to shut down Keane Lynch. There are tactics everywhere. Two guys going on TJ Reid every time he gets the ball and he wins a free or he pops it off for someone else to score. I mean, they're so clever. They've been the brand leaders for so long.
Jamesie, is it too convenient to wonder if Limerick didn't have that 4-week gap, how they might have handled the first quarter?
I mean, listen, John Kiley wasn't buying it. The stats don't lie, Joe. I mean, the record of Munster champions is deplorable, and I guess 3 in 19 years or something have gone on and won it or made the final. I just think that, listen, it's very, very hard to put 2 performances, big performances back to back, and Limerick were outstanding in the Munster final, and obviously, they had come through obviously in 3rd place, last year, and wanted maybe silverware, and had lost the 2 matches in Munster, and and all that kind of stuff. But they were at such a pitch physically and mentally, and in their home patches was the Gaelic grounds. I think John Kiley did the right thing in terms of giving the players a week off. And by all accounts, I mean, on the training weekend, it was ferociously hard and so on. But you can't legislate sometimes for some of the wides and some of the misses that Limerick had. And, I mean, 1-8, whatever, to 2 points down. I mean, at half time, Joe, there were 2 points in arrears and had put themselves really back in the match. But as I said, some of the wides and 15, like any time it gets into double digits, I always feel you're in trouble because you're going to rue some of those missed opportunities, and some of those wides were, I suppose, inexplicable from some of the players that shot them. And I think they were under so much pressure all over the field. I mean, even they got a couple of fantastic scores early on, but Sean Finn was hit as he gave the pass to Mike Casey, who had to ride a tackle to get the ball out to Tom Morrissey, who was under pressure and got the hand pass off to somebody else, and he went off again. And ultimately, we some brilliant team scores from Limerick, but they were under pressure all day long. And I think, when you have to work so hard to engineer the score, the scoring, or the shot, or get the shot off, and then someone drives it wide from in front of the post, I think in a way it maybe chips away at your inner confidence and your self-belief that, listen, we're going to maybe pay for these. We can't afford to be missing these kind of opportunities in such a tight match. And they just couldn't get level or get their noses in front, Joe. And I think if they had maybe got in front, it might have been a different story. But Kilkenny were always able to find, another score and keep the scoreboard ticking over. And, even at the end, I mean, look at Limerick were right there.
Should have had a 65
really
at the end.
Chance that, if Seamus Callanan had it, you reckon he'd have maybe hit the deck and put it into the bottom corner and really probably hit it, straight at Owen Murphy. And okay, it was a good save, but you'd have expected him to make that save. And you can point to so many things. I mean, obviously we'd probably get to discuss the 65 that was or wasn't, but Limerick had the chances, and in a tight match, and Kylie said it before the game, it's maybe going to come down to, who takes the opportunities in the inside line, and Limerick just didn't take enough of them.
I don't know if there's a certain, I agree with the vast majority of that, but I rewatched the match earlier, and I did a sort of a scoring chart of where Limerick took their shots from. They had very few shots in the scoring zone. All the teams have their sort of heat maps of where they want to score from, and it's generally the width of the let's say the 14-yard box all the way out to the 65 or the D. That's the optimal scoring area because you're pretty much in front of the post. And they got very few shots from those areas. They were forced out to the wings all the time because Kilkenny choked up that area. They left the men back, and Pádraig Walsh went to absolute town as well. So,
see, if you said that to a Kilkenny player, he'd say, "But that's not tactics. It's just good common sense."
Yeah, and it is too. David Reedy's chance, and there was a very similar chance for John McGrath in the Tipp Wexford game as well. And I'm not a forward or anything like that, and certainly not a scoring one. But if you're carrying the ball in like that, I think when you're at that narrow angle, you tend to have more success when you try and blast it into the roof of the net, because if you hit it low, the goalie is going to crouch in that sort of position, and maybe there's more of him to hit there. And if he is crouching, then obviously there's more room above. But look, I'm not a forward, but it's just a thought I had as I was watching.
Limerick just were never quite in their flow, not for any great chunk of game. It always felt like they were going to have to just get away with this one. They never quite hummed, even coming out from the back. There was a little segment picked out in the Sunday game last night where usually they would have gone short, they went long, and almost the inference was that there'd been 2 or 3 big hits on the Limerick player at that stage, and he was almost just rattled. So it's partly what Kilkenny did to them, and then it's also the fact that Limerick did not play their best stuff here. No,
they definitely didn't play their best stuff, but Graham Mulcahy was the only one that really stood up in the first half in terms of the forward line. He was exceptional throughout. I think William O'Donoghue had a very good game in midfield as well, and I was completely perplexed when he was taken off, and maybe it's just because he's the newest guy on the team that they thought to take him off. But they were all under massive pressure. Sean Finn on Colin Fennelly for that goal. That is a size mismatch, and I think most people are going to struggle one-on-one with Colin Fennelly. But they just seem to get a few things wrong here and there, and I think the cuteness of Hugh Lawler to constantly get Aaron Gillan on his weaker right side. He was hurler of the year coming into this game. And maybe his all-stars even gone now at this stage. But there's just cuteness in that Kilkenny team all the time. They force you out, shoot from uncomfortable areas. And because of that head start that Kilkenny got, it was always going to be hard to reel him in.
Jamesie, best Kilkenny players. TJ Reid got man of the match, and he's almost had a season of 2 halves where he was scoring huge amounts from play as well as from the frees, and now his scores from play have dwindled, but his effect on the game hasn't.
Oh, it hasn't, no, and his appetite for work, Joe, was phenomenal, and he's just the ability to win primary possession, and obviously he attracts attention and attracts defenders, and then invariably he takes the right option and slips the pass to somebody in a better position. And like, it's his selflessness at the moment is just so admirable, and he's, I suppose, really look at the ultimate team player. I thought Adrian Mullen was excellent. I mean, did he get 4 from play? Yeah. Again, worked very, very hard, and I think that score that Shane was referring to, where Tom Morrissey was swarmed by 4 of them, I think it ended up in Mullen's hand, and one look from almost the sideline, and he bisected the post, and so I thought he was excellent. Just for me, like, all over the field, even John Donnelly was the one forward we didn't mention in the sextet. At half time in our stats, John Donnelly had more possessions than any other Kilkenny player, and that tells you, like, that look, he was back in the team to do a job, and he got a great score actually, and then was substituted shortly afterwards, and I don't know whether that was Cody had his mind made up or whether they felt his race was run, but an unsung hero. But as I said, he had more possessions than any other Kilkenny player in that opening half. I think he had 11 possessions, whatever, which is, I think TJ finished with 18 as a top Kilkenny player. I thought Pádraig Walsh had a super match. Fennelly, again, obviously the goal was crucial, but he got a couple of clutch points as well in the second half when they were stumbling a bit, and Limerick were kind of coming back at them. But really, it was just, I think the big thing with Kilkenny all year, Joe, has been that Cody hasn't really had his best 15 available. I mean, Owen Murphy obviously was missing earlier in the year, and Buckley hasn't been available, and his knee hasn't been right, and he certainly isn't the Buckley of previous years, because he's an athlete, but he's not, for example, he doesn't have the same maybe silken hands that Richie Hogan does, and he probably needs the matches to get to the level and the standard that we've seen him play at for so long. Richie Hogan obviously hasn't been fully fit. Walter Walsh was out with a leg injury. James Maher was injured. Conor Delaney, who looked to be the first choice fullback, got injured and at the start of the championship. But it seems now like that. Listen, just when they need the most, Cody is getting all these guys back, and like, something during the week that drew my attention, like when they met in the semi-final in 2014, and Richie Power came off the bench and turned the match in the rain. It was a game that could have really, Limerick were in right to the death. There were only two Limerick players survived, Declan Hannon, I think, and Graham Mulcahy, but 8 Kilkenny starters played in 2014. So this is a team like with our Ireland medals, with big game experience, and okay, there's obviously an infusion of younger guys there, Hugh Lawler and Mullen and Donnelly and so on, but they're still guys that know how to get it done on the big days in Croke Park and know what success and victory tastes like. And those guys, their desire, TJ and Richie and Walter Walsh, to savour that taste again was on display. And by God, I mean, the appetite they showed was phenomenal. And it just got them over the line, because if they didn't have that, Joe, they won the game by a point, with Limerick probably below par, 15 wides. They had to deliver that performance to get into the final, and hats off to them for doing it. Yeah,
you mentioned the swarming there. I can't think of a game in recent times where there was that much of it. Like, possession would change hands 2 or 3 times in a passage of play. You just run into traffic, and it was Kerry against Armagh. Yeah. A final word on Limerick, Shane, before you move on to the other game and kind of glance ahead to the final, because we'll have weeks to talk about Kilkenny. They're still a young team. It's difficult when you're Munster champions, as we've discussed. Like, there's every likelihood that when we're all sitting around next January or February looking ahead to the year, a lot of people are going to be in the studio saying, I have a fancy for Limerick to come back strong. This is so far from the end of them. Yeah,
and same with Galway as well. These are 2 really strong teams. And I would say you'd have to credit the heart of Limerick to come back into this game after going, 1-8 to 2 points behind. A lot of other teams would have folded. Declan Hannon, should he have been even left on the field as long as he was, because he was in such bother that they had to bring Kyle Hayes back from centre forward to mark TJ Reid for a while, and then they took him off at half time.
Some people saying Hayes would have been better off staying where he was. That was their best period.
Yeah, sure, he was centre back for the under-21s a couple of years ago, and he was great, but they were struggling so badly in the half forward line. Groat Hegarty and Tom Morrissey eventually were both taken off that maybe they needed him up there as well. But they'll definitely be back, because they've got a really good management team, they have a nice style of play, but I think teams have finally had a number of big games to watch how they play, and they play the same way every day. If plan A doesn't work, you keep going with plan A. So they might have to find a way to evolve a little bit. It is fairly total hurling as it stands, but people now know that half forward line is going to go into their own half. If we sit back and protect in front of the full back line or full forward line, they're going to be in bother, so they're going to have to evolve a little.
Okay, we'll take a very short break. We'll talk more total hurling and the last remnants of the British Empire as well in one sec with Jamesie and Shane Stapleton. Welcome back. So we have Jamesie O'Connor on the line. We have Shane Stapleton still here in studio. We've talked about Kilkenny's win against Limerick, and then yesterday there was Wexford 320, Tipp 128, which was another epic. Davy Fitz, by the way, afterwards, let me say this straight out. Tipperary took the game by the scruff of the neck at the right time, and they did the business. Our hats are off to them. I admire the way they could have easily thrown in the towel when we went 5 up. They didn't. They found a way to win it, and all of us in Wexford would say well done to them. He was magnanimous afterwards. He can be accused sometimes of spitting the dummy out, having a go at the referee. If anything, I thought, like, if Tipperary had lost this game, then we would have been starting this conversation, Shane, with a conversation about the referee.
Yeah, it would have been. I mean, because there was a couple of goals there that, you know, the Jake Morris one even at the end as well. I know
the advantage one.
That was the one, the advantage. I mean, that was
the most egregious one. Like, the Hawkeye thing is a bit messy. There was the foul he gave against, was it for the Michael Breen goal? That wasn't really a foul.
That was harsh as well, yeah.
That was harsh. But to blow up and not play the advantage, the point of the rule is let the play develop. There's always a chance a player will get in on the end of a break, even if Callan was being fouled.
Inside the area, by the way.
Yeah. There was no benefit to blowing the whistle that early.
No, for sure. And it ruined what would have been the week from heaven for Jake Morris, because he scored the winning goal for the under-20s against Cork in the Munster final during the week.
Yeah.
And then this would have been the winning goal. Now, he ended up getting with the winning point anyway, so it's still a great week for him.
Yeah.
But yeah, some of that decision-making is... Like, there's no issue with the red card for John McGrath. We never saw what the first yellow card was for. I presume there was a bit of niggling and getting to know each other going on. But the second one, I don't think it was dirt out of him. I think it was just the guy's there, he's with the ball, and it's just a reflex reaction.
He knew as soon as he did it.
Yeah.
The recoil, it was like, too late, I've hit you.
I'm done. But what an epic game it was. And like, you definitely rightly questioned Tipperary after the Munster final, and I would have questioned the way that Liam Sheedy set up that team and some of the tactical selections. But you couldn't question the heart of the team in this particular game. To go down to 14 men, to have all those decisions go against you, and to still pull it out of the fire, like, that's as good as I've ever seen from Tipperary.
Really, yeah. Liam Sheedy at full time, Jamesie was like almost paralysed with some kind of internal seismic thing going on. It was like he just didn't know, he couldn't express himself. He was just trying to breathe, and it was, you know, amazing scenes with him over with his daughters, and he must have thought he was gone. Like, you take the key moments. 45 minutes, John McGrath gets that second yellow. 48 minutes, Lee Chin scores that goal. That's a 5-point lead. Like, at that point, you're done. It's over.
Yeah, well, I turned to JJ in the studio and said, listen, you know, Tipp are going to need at least one goal to win this. And obviously, you're thinking, you know, with you know, Kevin Foley's going to sit back a bit now, and that task becomes it becomes huge. They didn't get the goal. I mean, okay, Jake Morris probably should have stood, but they got 12 points, and like, it was unbelievable. I mean, I suppose, look at it. It's how often have we seen it, Joe? The psychology, the man gets sent off, and whatever it is in the GA, everyone else just now finds something within themselves and digs deeper and gets that 5% extra out of them that makes a difference. I mean, so I suppose, look at a couple of things from a Tipperary perspective. I just thought the leaders on the team really stood up. I mean, the half-back line, the two Mahers, three Mahers, you know, Ronan was man of the match, and deservedly so, but, you know, Brendan I thought was phenomenal. Carl Barrett had a huge game. Noel McGrath, Callan was just, I thought, immense right throughout the game. And then, you know, when I suppose, look at the Tipp management, you've got to give credit to Sheedy and his team, because, you know, you felt this game is energy sapping. It was exhausting. No more than Saturday night, it was exhausting watching it. You know, they needed fresh legs, and they got the fresh legs on, and crucially, you know, the fresh legs made a difference, and they all contributed on the scoreboard, which was massive. And I suppose, from a Wexford perspective, you know, they didn't use the extra man. I mean, you know, the lads I think highlighted it maybe last night, the Sunday game, that they appeared to get very narrow on the puck out. Foley wasn't available maybe as an outlet, and Mark Fanning just kept going long, and it seemed that, you know, that the Wexford half-forward line were pushing further and further, dropping nearly on the 21 where the puck out was landing, and as a result then there was maybe more space for the Tipp half-forwards to kind of come out into, and in contrast then I suppose Wexford maybe bottled things up a little bit at their own end, and they got nothing out of it because the Tipp half-back line were just gobbling up that ball, and it was meat and drinking them, and Barrett was so good then on the break. And I mean, I suppose 1-2 from Wexford perspective in the last probably 27 minutes of the game, because there was 22 left I think when Chin got the goal, and then there was 5 or 6 minutes stoppage time. Therein lies the answer to, you know, to why they didn't close it out. But like, credit to Wexford, Joe. I mean, it was exhilarating, some of the stuff that Wexford played in the first half.
Yeah.
And I mean, Tipp were at 6 and 7s because inside the first 10 minutes, I mean, there were at least 2 gilt-edged goal opportunities that if Wexford players had taken maybe different options and worked maybe the overlap of the 2-on-1 or picked out the right pass, it was in the back of the net. And even after that, they had you know, a couple of really good opportunities where, again, fellas just need to maybe, it's on now, take it on rather than popping it over the bar. And like, Tipp didn't really know what was happening. Finally, they kind of got to grips with it. And I think the fact that game, that running game, requires such energy, and you know, I don't think it's sustainable over 70 minutes.
Have they ever sustained it over 70 minutes?
Well, I just don't know if you can sustain it. I mean, it's like, you know, it's to be fair, and I mean, like, I haven't seen. I mean, you know, Wexford created more goal opportunities for me yesterday than they have in the last 3 years, really, under Davy.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, well, certainly in one match. Maybe that's been a bit unfair, but certainly in one match. And I mean, it was a joy to watch. I mean, it was fantastic. You know, just to see that. Okay, I mean, the one in the first half was Sean Murphy. I mean, he just took off, and Bubbles suddenly looks, and Bubbles realises, like, he's gone. I got to go with him because this. You know, the Wexford forwards had kind of come out and left the space for him to run into. And really, I mean, it was just, he evaded, I think, the last defender, and suddenly if he kept going and drew, I think Barry Heffron it was, and slipped it to MacDonald, I mean, it had to be a goal, but he shot, I think, and Ronan Maher or someone just got a block on it. I think By Hogan would have saved it anyway. But it was, as I said, it was scintillating at times in that in that first half. But yeah, Joe, I don't know, you know, you can't get up and down that pitch, and especially, I mean, it was warm in Croke Park yesterday. I mean, the sun was beating down on those guys, and like, the hits are going in, then there was a physical contest, and I mean, the endurance levels of all 4 teams. I mean, even on Saturday night, I mean, you're saying, look, if this goes to extra time, these guys can't possibly have anything left, given the energy levels they've expended. And you felt the same way on Sunday, and maybe, you know, as that punishing running that some of the Wexford guys did in the first 40-45 minutes, they just maybe couldn't sustain it. I think Davey said it maybe afterwards, that if they kept running the ball, they probably would have got a return, because Tipp didn't seem to have the answers to it. But maybe, as I said, it's just down to the fact that sustaining that for 70 minutes in, you know, given the pace the game has been played at now, the 2 games are played at the weekend, it's just nigh and impossible to do.
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting observation. On the sending off, a lot of people have made the point that 6v5 still leaves more space than 7v6, and maybe in a perverse way that played into Tipp hands. As to Jamesie's point, Wexford could Tipp open. Like, the running game in full flow is a joy to watch. It is total hurling. We'll get on to tactics and the evolution of the game in just a second. But, you know, it really is. If that is sustainable across 70 minutes, then they would have won that game. You give Tipp some credit. But, you know, like, Wexford had more than enough goal chances to win that game. They just didn't see out those scenarios to their logical end. They were almost got just a bit of a nosebleed thing. Even Lee Chin's goal, and you have to say, okay, if you score it, you're right to shoot. I still think if you play that scenario out 10 times, you shouldn't shoot there. You've got the overload. So
probably should have been saved.
Yeah, exactly, as well. Yeah. They are going to look back at this game and regret those missed goal chances. Callan got such an easy point straight after the Chin goal, where he's out under the Hogan. He's just completely on his own, pops one over, and that was, you know, to bring it back to 4 points as opposed to kicking on. Like, all these moments add up. Wexford are going to regret this even more than Limerick.
Yeah, they did far more to hurling in the first half.
Yeah.
Tipp were under such pressure that they hit aimless ball up the field a number of times, like 50-50 ball into that full back line, which is quite big. Matt O'Hanlon went corner back on Ford. You had Liam Ryan full back, and then Damien Ricks, obviously not huge, but Kevin Foley is there as well. So Tipp were reduced to just hitting long ball for a lot of it. I'd look at the last 15 or 16 minutes, including injury time, as the key moment. Wexford stopped using the ball. They stopped looking up. They just started lumping it, like you said, which meant they had a huge amount of turnovers of their own ball.
That could be finishing line fever as well as tiredness.
Perhaps, but the way they saw it out against Kilkenny in the Leinster final, Kilkenny were the ones who blinked first. I don't know. Like, maybe it is, though. It could be, because every game is different.
Yeah.
But in those last 16 minutes, incredibly, despite having an extra man, they had just 4 shots.
Right.
Like, which
16 minutes.
Yeah. So after Conor MacDonald got the goal.
Yeah, that was on 59 minutes. Yeah.
After that, they had 4 more shots.
Right.
Which and 3 of them were frees. So they just weren't creating at all. A key moment I thought was just around 50 minutes. Bubbles had just hit a wide for Tipperary, and Paul Morris had a shot from about the 45, but it was a shot he shouldn't have really took on. He was wheeling away from goals, probably tired. Damien Reck was standing in, the cornerback Damien Reck was standing in the 14 on his own for Wexford. Popped a little ball in there, and that's lights out, because it would have been 8 points in it. Just to go look at one of the tactics in the first half that really backfired on Tipperary. So Bubbles was put wing forward. Sean Murphy, who's a really good hurler, went out on him.
He didn't want to follow Sean Murphy anymore.
No, there was a sideline cut, and Sean Murphy received the sideline cut, hit a shot that went short. He was obviously in for that goal chance early on that Ronan Maher knocked away, and then set up the goal as well.
Yeah.
So moving him inside, where he got a bit more joy off Simon Donoghue, won a couple of frees and got a point at the second half.
Scored a point, started the second half. Yeah,
but I've hammered Liam Sheedy for the Munster final and the way the team was set up there. But I'm absolutely delighted to give out lots of credit for what he did here, which was bringing Seamus Kennedy in to man-mark Jack O'Connor from the start. And he was able to keep with him all day, because Jack O'Connor is able to run right up the centre, much like Lee Chin, who was blotted out for a huge amount of that game by Barry Heffernan, who had to be taken off exhausted with just a couple of minutes to go. So Tipperary have had question marks in the back for a long time now, but all of a sudden it's a far more mobile and has far more size, because you brought in 2 6'3" guys who can move.
Yeah.
And credit has to be given for that, finally doing that.
Meanwhile, the philosophical tug-of-war over hurling continues, Jamesie. It's amazing how many people are talking about the Sunday game last night, and Don Logue's comments in particular. Here he is summing up. I there was a real sense here of McGrath and Don Logue, Cusack, almost recognising they had more time than usual on the Sunday game highlight show, because there were only 2 games, and it was like they looked at each other and said, right, we're going to get some things off our chest here. We've got a few things to say, and off they went. So this is kind of the clip that's generated the most reaction.
Let's call a spade a spade. A lot of the way that Davey is challenged, and this man has been challenged, it's as if they're disrespecting the game in some way. I'd actually say that not to innovate is actually disrespecting the game. And also, as I'm at it reminds me what was happening in the mid-2000s when it came to Gaelic football. You had a lot of very intelligent coaches that were playing the game in a certain way, but it was very easy to make cheap shots about the likes of puke football and so on. Why weren't people asking, why did people want to do this? Why were coaches doing what they wanted to do? And I think it's fantastic. Is there only one way that we should be playing our game of hurling? I don't think so. I don't want teams coming with one way of playing the game. I want to see teams come with different ideas, different ways of approaching it, different tactics, like we saw with Wexford today. And the last point I'll make, right, as I'm on it, because the thing that's often in my mind, I actually believe that type of, accusation of disrespecting the traditions of the games, I actually think it's part of the last remnants of British culture on these islands, right? Because we know that the British, with the games that they founded a lot of them, right? But they struggled to accept and adapt to all of the wider influences in their game. And I would equate exactly this long ball to John Bull type spirit, Jack Charlton type spirit. It's exactly the same type of spirit for me, but I'm delighted that the modern player has moved on, because I tell you, Des, if you went into any modern inter-county dressing room, they wouldn't even be interested in that talk. They know themselves that the game has moved on. The same fellas who were challenging that type of stuff, I bet you they would have been challenging at one stage picking the ball off the ground in hurling, wasn't being scoffed at. Mackey was one of the first fellas to solo with the ball, and you still had some people on his case. I bet you they'd be the same fellas that are on the likes of Davies, and Derek's case would have been on Mackey's case in the day.
So look, it wasn't everyone's cup of tea. Ken McGrath tweeted during the programme, absolute nonsense, ego's gone out of control. Ollie Moran said that they'd wasted 10 minutes of the Sunday game pontificating about hurling philosophies and ideologies. Joe Public would prefer if you just raved about the exhibition of skill and manliness that we saw today, manliness being crucial. Look, the remnants of the British Empire stuff is kind of nonsensical, really. Like the British Empire or the British culture is everywhere, and of all the things it's shaped, it's probably not hurling top of the list. But there is maybe something in a parallel with, say, British football. A lack of innovation, a lack of experimentation, splendid isolation from the continent and the way the game was changing there. Johnny Foreigner only pitches up into the Premier League in the 90s, and there's this outcry that you're ruining the game and diving and all that stuff. And there has been, in both codes, a lack of innovation across the 20th century, you would have to say. And football got ahead of hurling a little bit, and now hurling is catching up quite quickly. The lighter sliotar makes things more adaptable, conditioning of players. So I do think there was a core point there, Jamesie. hurling is in a state of flux at the moment. Like, for a start, just calling what Davy and Wexford produced yesterday as, you know, the sweeper system is the most reductive thing imaginable. You know, we talked about total hurling. It was probably more defensive when they first started doing it, him and McGrath, but like what they were doing yesterday, like the sweeper is not the defining aspect of that.
Absolutely not. But I think, listen, don't tell me that Eamon O'Shea wasn't innovative as a coach, or the stuff that Tipperary played, you know, 29, 2010, 2011, 20, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That era when O'Shea came back as manager, that wasn't entertaining or innovative, or that the movement and creativity wasn't on display. Of course it was. And look at some of the stuff that Kilkenny played, you know, in their prime and in their pomp. I mean, you know, that like Kilkenny are as innovative as anybody. And I mean, Cody, you know, I think Cody probably doesn't get enough credit, or Michael Dempsey. I mean, I would say those guys are cutting it in terms of, you know, where sport science is at, and where strength and conditioning is at, and where tactics are at. And, you know, I don't think they miss anything that's happening, you know, on the intercounty stage. But for me, the big thing about Wexford yesterday was we saw stuff from Wexford yesterday, Joe, where I think they are miles further forward on than they were, for example, at the same stage last year. Because I looked at them, you know, against Clare in the quarter-final last year, and it looked tired, it looked staid, it looked, in a way, possibly that it ran its course. And, you know, even in the league in Ennis this year, I mean, you know, I kind of was down, you know, down at the 20 kind of 1 metre line. I said, I'm going to stay, you know, just watch the Wexford forwards and you know, and see what's kind of going on here. And I didn't really see a whole lot of kind of creativity, or, you know, Clare were, I don't know, maybe 10, 12 points up at one stage. And Wexford, in fairness, Davy came down to the sideline and they made a contest of it. But it was Clare nearly switching off as much as anything else. But yesterday, it was, I mean, there was some unbelievable stuff played by Wexford yesterday, in terms of, look at just the movement and the awareness to listen. There's a guy overlapping me, and the 1-2s, and it was a treat to watch. And, you know, that was innovative. And yeah, of course we want to see that. Yeah, it was deep. And I mean, again, I was back late from Dublin last night, and I kind of was flicking through and saw some of the stuff that the lads did on the Sunday game, but I didn't see all of it. But it is taped, and it will get a viewing at some stage in the next 24 hours.
Yeah, because I heard Michael Digan with the Second Captains lads today, and he was making the point, in fairness, I didn't like the sweeper when it first came on the scene, but even he was saying, like, what we saw this weekend is different to the first iteration of it.
Yeah, like, there's no need to justify how you set up a team anyway.
Well, yeah.
I think in general, the people who question it are people who don't watch hurling enough to see how much it's evolved, or they don't want to have to think about the tactics and just be like, it's all down to work rate and who wanted it more on the day. Well, like, that's a prerequisite to a hurling team. You have to want it, and you have to put your body on the line like these players do. Like, hurling has evolved a lot over the years. The one innovation that there used to be was bring a corner forward out as a third midfielder. But if you look at what Kevin Foley did yesterday, and you'd have to credit Davy from swapping from Sean Murphy as sweeper about a year and a half ago to Kevin Foley, because Murphy had been brilliant at it, but it just wasn't working for him anymore, and now Murphy's playing very well elsewhere. But yesterday, Kevin Foley, he was a sweeper standing on the D, obviously protecting his defence, but when he got the ball, it was give and go, and it's like kind of like Gaelic football now, and like Bubbles found out against Sean Murphy, if you don't track your man, he's going to keep going. Damien Reck was in the opposition half, Simon Donoghue and Kevin Foley, as I said, he got a point as well. But what I also thought was a really clever thing from what Davy Fitz obviously pre-planned was that there was going to be a conundrum from the puckouts then. Like, Tipperary were going to have a spare man somewhere on the field if there was a sweeper back at the other end for Wexford. But what Kevin Foley did every time is he ran from the D all the way out to the left wing position where Michael Breen was standing on his own. So he was doing shuttle runs in and out to make sure that Wexford were man on man for the puckouts, but then he was straight back in as a sweeper as well. It was one of the many innovations throughout the game that I love watching that. And because the whole game should be about, well, we're going to plug a gap back here, so Tipperary need to see, well, what opportunity does that create elsewhere?
Were there legitimate, though, criticisms of what the likes of McGrath and Davy were doing, especially at the start? Like, they weren't scoring enough goals, they were too defensive, they were never going to win in All-Ireland, they did need to kick on from where they started. That was a legitimate viewpoint at the time, wasn't it?
Yeah, I suppose, but like, I think the reason Waterford played with a sweeper is not because their backs weren't good enough, but because their forwards weren't good enough. And they just needed a platform and an extra guy to be able to work the ball out the field.
Yeah.
And they just needed to flood the midfield area because they were just getting overrun. So
That's a smart thing. That's cutting your cloth. Yeah, Jamesie, yeah.
First of all, I mean, if you're coming up against Seamus Callan and Bubbles and John McGrath and Noel McGrath and Bonner and you know, or you're coming up against Henry Shefflin, Richie Power, TJ Reid and you know, and so on, and you know, there's serious firepower, and maybe listen, you don't have the defenders maybe with the ability to go, you know, man on man with those guys. Well, then listen, you know, if you can take them on 15 and 15 and feel that, you know, you're going to win the game, like why wouldn't you maybe play an extra sweeper? I think that the problem was, I think that the criticism was that, listen, that only takes you so far. The problem is, in a way, maybe you're keeping the score down or you're keeping yourself in the match. But if they get ahead, you're just not going to put enough on the board at the other end of the field. And that was what was so refreshing about yesterday was, listen, Wexford scored 320, but could have had 520. You know what I mean? Could have had 620.
Yeah. And so they have improved. They have evolved themselves, even in recent times.
That was the big evolution for me yesterday. And even you know, from the Leinster final, I mean, the Leinster final they hit was at 123, but that was with 3 wides. That was with all the frees being nailed. It was with the big players performing, but shots going over that maybe shouldn't even have been taken on. And you know, you just wondered yesterday again, would those same shots go over, and could they possibly be as efficient? And you know, I just didn't think that, you know, they'd get enough scores. The unfortunate thing, especially from a Wexford perspective, is, you know, they hit 29 points in an All-Ireland semi-final, leaving probably a few goal opportunities behind them. It was just maybe defensively they conceded us. There's 12 points in the last 25 minutes of the game, and that's the really disappointing thing. So look at Wexford. Hats off to them and, you know, Davy and the management team, because as I said, we saw strings to their bow yesterday that we hadn't seen before, and that was refreshing. And as I said, you know, that was the innovation that Cusack is talking about. Yeah.
All that said, sorry, just clocks against us. It's worth touching the fact, in the final, are we going to have a complete throwback, that said?
I'd say the middle will be it'll be like blanket midfield in hurling. By the way, the full-backs scored 3 points. Like 2 for Ronan Maher and 1 for Liam Ryan yesterday.
But Liam Ryan's point was one of the great points you'll ever see.
Incredible. But again, Callan didn't follow him initially. Yeah. And Liam Ryan kept going, because that's the way Wexford play now.
Yeah. But compare what Tipp and Kilkenny were coming up with in 09-10 versus what we're going to see in 3 weeks' time.
Yeah, you see, I think both of these teams want to play a fairly traditional sort of a game. And I have a fair feeling that it will be the 2 half-forward lines coming out into midfield as well, and it'll be more or less 3-on-3 either side, with the 2 centre-backs trying to sit back a little bit. So I don't think it'll be that dissimilar to all those games that we saw in the last number of years, but it'll be blood and thunder for sure.
Yeah, I think blood and thunder feels like it'll be the defining aspect of the final, Jamesie.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Cody's forgotten or forgiven Sheedy for 2010. he's waited a long time to get another crack at him in the final, and listen, I was involved in the Railway Cup with Liam, whatever his lector, in, I don't know what year it was, maybe 2011, 2012, whatever. And I wasn't actually. I was, I think, away on holidays, whatever, when they played Leinster in Nolan Park, right? Munster playing Leinster, and I remember seeing Liam O'Shea afterwards and Eamon saying, like, there was events that, listen, Liam Sheedy's in town, lads, you know, and the Kilkenny fellas drove it and beat Munster, and like it's. You know, Sheedy, does Sheedy Sheedy isn't the type of guy who's going to take a backward step either. And listen, like, look at this. There's so many great players on both sides. I mean, like, the 2 Mahers, Brendan Porrick, Callan and Noel McGrath, those guys are into their 10th, 11th, 12th seasons. And they've given some service to Tipperary, and, you know, they only have 2 medals. And, you know, they were immense yesterday, like when the need was greatest for Tipp. And on the other side, like, to see the level that TJ is at, and the honesty and the work rate, and, you know, Walsh and Colin Fennelly and Richie, you know, what they've given, you know, you wouldn't begrudge any of these guys another medal, but no one's going to hand it to them. They're going to have to earn it. And let's just say, from a Tipp perspective, there ain't going to be 100 yards of space to put the Seamus Callan on the edge of the square as there was in 2016.
Yeah.
And that I think still to this day, I mean, you know, Cody would probably look back on that one and say, how do we allow you know, ourselves to be that open at the back? And certainly, for sure, that won't be happening in 3 weeks' time.
Yeah, if the weekend was maybe his finest hour, that was one of his low points for sure. It's going to be a fun 3 weeks of build-up. Jamesie, thanks so much, appreciate it.
Cheers, Joe. Cheers, Shane.
Shane Stapleton, thanks for coming to the studio.
Thank you.